Part 2, The Agricultural Revolution. Book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Chapter number 7, Memory Overload. Evolution did not endow humans with the ability to play football. True. It produced legs for kicking, elbows for fouling, and mouth for cursing. But all that this enables us to do is perhaps practice penalty kicks by ourselves. To get into game with the strangers we find in the schoolyard. On any given afternoon, we not only have to work in concert with 10 teammates we may never have met before, we also need to know that the 11 players on the opposing team are playing by the same rules. Other animals that engage strangers in ritualized aggression do so largely by instinct. Puppies throughout the world have the rules for rough and tumble play, hard wired into their genes, but human teenagers have no genes for football. They can nevertheless play the game with complete strangers because they have all learned an identical set of ideas about football. These ideas are entirely imaginary, but if everyone shares them, we can all play the game. The same applies on a large scale to kingdoms, churches, and trade networks with one important difference. The rules of footballs are relatively simple and concise, much like those necessary for cooperation in a forager band or small village. Each player can easily store them in his brain and still have room for songs, images, and shopping lists. But large system of cooperation that involve not 22 but thousands or even millions of humans requires the handling and storage of huge amount of information, much more than any single human brain can contain and process. The large societies found in some other species, such as ants and bees, are stable and resilient because most of the information needed to sustain them is encoded in the genome. A female honeybee larva can, for example, grow up to be either a queen or a worker, depending on what food it is fed. Its DNA programs the necessary behaviors for whatever role it will fulfill in life. Hives can be very complex social structures containing many different kinds of workers, such as harvesters, nurses, and cleaners. But so far, researchers have failed to locate the lawyer bees. Bees don't need lawyers because there is no danger that they might forget or violate the hive constitution. The queen does not cheat the cleaner bees of their food, and they never go on strike demanding higher wages. But humans do such things all the time because the sapiens social order is imagined. Humans cannot preserve the critical information for running it simply by making copies of their DNA and passing these on to their progeny. A conscious effort has to be made to sustain laws, custom procedures, and manners. Otherwise, the social order would quickly collapse. For example, King Hammurabi decreed that people are divided into a superiors, commoners, and slaves. Unlike the behave class system, this is not a natural division. There is no trace of it in the human genome. If the Babylonians could not keep this truth in mind, their society would have ceased to function. Similarly, when Hammurabi passed his DNA to his offspring, it did not encode his ruling that a superior man who killed a commoner woman must pay 30 silver shekels. Hammurabi deliberately had to instruct his sons in the laws of his empire, and his sons and grandsons had to do the same. Empires generate huge amount of information beyond laws. Empires have to keep accounts of transaction and taxes, inventories of military supplies and merchant vessels, and calendars of festival and victories. For millions of years, people stored information in a single place, their brains. Unfortunately, the human brain is not a good storage device for empire sized databases for three main reasons. First, its capacity is limited True, some people have astonishing memories, and in ancient times there were memory professionals who could store in their heads the topographies of whole provinces and the law codes of entire states. Nevertheless, there is a limit that even a master mnemonist cannot transcend. A liar might know by heart the entire law code of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but not the details of the every legal proceeding that took place in Massachusetts from the Salem witch trials onwards. Secondly, humans die and their brains die with them, and information stored in brain will be erased in less than a century. It is of course possible to pass memories from one brain to another, by after a few transmissions the information tends to get garbled or lost. Thirdly, and most importantly, the human brain has been adapted to store and process only particular types of information. In order to survive, ancient hunter gatherers had to remember the shapes, qualities, and behavior pattern of thousands of plant and animal species. They had to remember that a wrinkled yellow mushrooms growing in atom under an elm tree is most probably poisonous, whereas a similar looking mushroom growing in winter under an oak tree is a good stomach ache remedy. Hunter gatherers also had to bear in mind the opinions and relation of several dozen band members. If Lucy needed a band member's help to get John to stop harassing her, it was important for her to remember that John had fallen out last week with Mary, who would thus be a likely and enthusiastic ally. Consequently, evolutionary pressure have adapted the human brain to store immense quantities of bionautical, zoological, topographical, and social information. But when particularly complex societies began to appear in the wake of the agricultural revolution, a completely new type of information became vital: numbers. Foragers were never obliged to handle large amounts of mathematical data. No forager needed to remember, say, the number of fruit on each tree in the forest, so humans' brain did not adapt to storing and processing numbers. Yet, in order to maintain a large kingdom, mathematical data was vital. It was never enough to legislate laws and tell stories about guardian gods. One also had to collect taxes. In order to tax hundreds of thousands of people, it was imperative to collect data about people's incomes and possessions. Data about payment made, data about areas, debts, and fines, data about payments made, areas, debts, and fines, data about discounts and exemptions. This added up the millions of data bits which had to be stored and processed. Without this capacity, the state would never know that resources it had and what further resources it could tap. When confronted with the need to memorize, recall, and handle all these numbers, most human brains overdosed or fell asleep. This mental limitation severely concentrated the size and complexity of human collectivities. When the amount of people and property in a particular society crossed a critical threshold, it became necessary to store and process large amounts of mathematical data. Since the human brain could not do it, the system collapsed. For thousands of years after the agricultural revolution, human social network remained relatively small and simple. The first to overcome the problem were the ancient Sumerians, who lived in southern Mesopotamia. Their scorching sun beating upon rich muddy plains produced plentiful harvests and prosperous towns. As the number of inhabitants grew, so did the amount of information required to coordinate their affairs between the years 3500 BC and 3000 BC. Some unknown Sumerian geniuses invented a system for storing and processing information outside their brains, one that was custom built to handle large amount of mathematical data. The Sumerians thereby released their social order from the limitations of human brain, opening the way for the appearance of cities, kingdoms, and empires. The data processing system invented by the Sumerians is called writing. Topic: Signed Koshim. Writing is a method for storing information through material science. The Sumerian writing system did so by combining two types of signs, which were pressed in clay tablets. One type of signs represented numbers. There were signs for 1, 10, 60, 600, 3600 and 36,000. The Sumerians used a combination of base 6 and base 10 numeral system. Their basic system bestowed on us several important legacies, such as the division of the day into a 24 hours of the circle into a 360-degree. The other type of sign represented people, animal, merchandise, territories, dates, and so forth. By combining both types of sign, the Sumerians were able to preserve far more data than any human brains could remember or any DNA chain could encode. At this early stage, writing was limited to facts and figures. The great Sumerian novel, if there ever was one, was never committed to clay tablets. Writing was time consuming and the reading public tiny, so no one saw any reason to use it for anything other than essential record keeping. If we look for the first words of wisdom reaching us from our ancestor 5,000 years ago, we are in for a big disappointment. The earlier message our ancestors have left us read, for example, 29,086 mayors, barely 37 months Koshim. The most probable reading of this sentence is a total of 29,086 mayors of the barley were received over the course of 37 months. Signed, Koshim. Alas, the first text of history contains no philosophical insights, no poetry, legends, laws, or even royal triumphs. They are humdrum economic documents recording the payment of taxes, the accumulation of debts, and the ownership of property. Only one other type of text survived from these ancient days, and it is even less exciting. Lists of words copied over and over again by apprentices, scribes as training exercises. Even had a bored student wanted to write out some of his poem instead of copy a bill of sale, he could not have done so. The earliest Sumerian writing was a partial rather than a full script. Full script is a system of material science that can represent spoken language more or less completely. It can therefore express everything people can say, including property. Partial script, on the other hand, is a system of material science that can represent only particular types of information belonging to a limited field of activity. Latin script, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, and Braille are full scripts. You can use them to write text registers, love poems, history books, food recipes, and business law. In contrast, the earlier Sumerian script, like modern mathematical symbols and musical notations, are partial scripts. You can use mathematical script to make calculation, but you cannot use it to write love poems. It did not disturb the Sumerians that their script was ill suited for writing property. They did not invent it in order to copy spoken language, but rather to do things that spoken language failed at. There were some cultures, such as those of the pre Columbian Andes, which used only partial script throughout their entire histories, unfazed by their script's limitations and feeling no need for a full version. Andean script was very different from its Sumerian counterpart. In fact, it was so different that many people would argue it was not a script at all. It was not written on clay tablets or pieces of paper. Rather, it was written by tying notes on colorful cords called quepus. Each quepu consisted of many cords of different colors made of wool or cotton. On each cord, several notes were tied in different places. A single quepo could contain hundreds of cords and thousands of notes. By combining different notes on different cords with different colors, it was possible to record large amounts of mathematical data relating to, for example, tax collection and property ownership. For hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, quepus were essential to business of cities, kingdoms, and empires. They reached their full potential under the Inca empires, which ruled 10 to 12 million people and covered today's Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, as well as Chinky of Chile, Argentina, and Colombia. Thanks to Quipus, the Incas could save and process large amounts of data without which they would not have been able to maintain the complex administrative machinery that an empire of that size requires. In fact, Quipus was so effective and accurate that in the early years following the Spanish conquest of South America, the Spaniards themselves employed Quipus in the work of administering their new empire. The problem was that the Spaniards did not themselves know how to record and read Quipus, making them dependent on local professionals. The continent's new rules realized that this placed them in a tenuous position. The native Quipu experts could easily mislead and cheat their overlords. So once Spain's dominion was more firmly established, Quipus were phased out and the new empire's records were kept entirely in Latin script and numerals. Very few Quipus survived the Spanish occupation and most of those remaining are undecipherable. Since unfortunately the art of reading Coopers has been lost. Topic: The wonders of bureaucracy. The Mesopotamians eventually started to want to write down things other than monotonous mathematical data between 3000 BC and 2500 BC. More and more signs were added to the Sumerian system, gradually transforming it into a full script that we today call cuneiform. By 2500 BC, kings were using cuneiform to issue decrees, priests were using it to record oracles, and less exalted citizens were using it to write personal letters. At roughly the same time, Egyptians developed another full script known as hieroglyphics. Other full scripts were developed in China around 1200 BC and in Central America around 1000 to 500 BC. From these initial centers, full script spread far and wide, taking on various new forms and novel tasks. People began to write poetry, history, books, romances, dramas, and prophecies and cookbooks. Yet, writing's most important task continued to be the storage of reams of mathematical data, and that task remained the prerogative of partial script. The Hebrew Bible, the Greek Iliad, and the Hindu Mahabharata and the Buddhist Tipitaka all began as oral works. For many generations, they were transmitted orally and would have lived on even had writing never been invented. But text registers and the complex bureaucracies were born together with partial script, and the two remain inexorably linked to this day. Siamese twins. Think of the cryptic entires in computerized databases and spreadsheets. As more and more things were written, and particularly as administrative archives grew to huge proportions, new problems appeared. Information stored in the person brain is easy to retrieve. My brain stores billions of bits of data, yet I can quickly, almost instantaneously recall the name of Italy's capital immediately afterwards, recollect what I did on 11 September 2001, and then reconstruct the route leading from my house to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Exactly how the brain does it remain a mystery, but we all know that the brain's retrieval system is amazingly efficient, except when you are trying to remember where you put your car keys. How though do you find and retrieve information stored in Quipu codes or clay tablets? If you have just 10 tablets or 100 tablets, it's not a problem. But what if you have accumulated thousands of them, as did one of the Hammurabi's contemporaries, King Zamrilim of Mary? Imagine for a moment that it's 1776 BC. The two Marians are quarreling over possession of a wheat field. Jacob insists that he bought the field from Esau 30 years ago. Esau retorts that he in fact rented the field to Jacob for a term of 30 years and that now the term being up, he intends to reclaim it. They shout and wrangle and start pushing one another before they realize that they can resolve their dispute by going to the royal archive, where are housed the deeds and bills of sale that apply to all the kingdom's real estate. Upon arriving at the archive, they are shuttled from one official to the other. They wade through several herbal tea breaks, are told to come back tomorrow, and eventually are taken by a grumbling clerk to look for the relevant relevant clay tablet. The clerk opens a door and leads them into a huge room lined floor to ceiling with thousands of clay tablets. No wonder the clerk is sore faced. How is he supposed to locate the deed to the disputed wheat field written 30 years ago? Even if he finds it, how will he be able to cross check to ensure that the one from 30 years ago is the latest document relating to the field in question? If he can't find it, does that prove that Isu never sold or rented out the field, or just that the document got lost or turned to mush when some rain leaked into our archive? Clearly, just imprinting a document in clay is not enough to guarantee efficient, accurate, and convenient data processing. That requires method of organization like catalog, methods of reproduction like photocopy machines, method of rapid and accurate retrieval like computer algorithm, and pedantic librarians who know how to use these tools. Inventing such method proved to be far more difficult than inventing writing. Many writing systems develop independently in culture distant in time and place from each other. Every decade, archaeologists discover another few forgotten scripts. Some of them might prove to be even older than the Sumerian scratches in clay, but most of them remain curiosities because those who invented them failed to invent efficient ways of cataloging and retrieving data. What set apart Sumer as well as Pharaonic Egypt, ancient China, and the Inca Empire is that these cultures developed good techniques of archiving, cataloging, and retrieving written record. They also invested in schools for scribes, clerk, librarians, and accountants. A writing exercise from a school in ancient Mesopotamia discovered by modern archaeologists give us to glimpse into the lives of these students some 44,000 years ago. I went in and sat down, and my teacher read my tablet. He said, "There's something missing," and he canned me. One of the people in charge said, "Why did you open your mouth without any permission?" and he canned me. The one in the charge of the rules said, "Why did you get up without my permission?" and he canned me. The gatekeeper said, "Why are you going out without my permission?" and he canned me. The keeper of the beer jug said, "Why did you get some without any my permission?" and he canned me. The Sumerian teacher said, "Why did you speak Akkadian? Akkadian?" and he canned me. My teacher said, "Your handwriting is not good," and he canned me. Ancient scribes learned not merely to read and write, but also to use catalog, dictionaries, calendars, forms, and tables. They studied and internalized techniques of cataloging, retrieving, and processing information very different from those used by the brain. In the brain, all data is freely associated. When I go with my spouse to sign on a mortgage for our new house, I am reminded of the first place we lived together, which reminds me of our honeymoon in New Orleans, which reminds me of alligators, which remind me of dragons, which remind me of the ring of the Nibelungen. And suddenly, before I know it, there I am humming the Siegfried leitmotif to a puzzled bank clerk. In bureaucracy, things must be kept apart. There is one drawer for home mortgages, another for marriage certificate, a third for tax register, and a fourth for lawsuits. Otherwise, how can you find anything? Things that belong in more than one drawer, like Wagnerian music dramas, are a terrible headache. So one is forever adding, deleting, and rearranging the drawers. In order to function, the people who operate such a system of drawers must be reprogrammed to stop thinking as humans and to start thinking as clerks and accountants. As everyone from ancient times till today know, clerks and accountants think in a non-human fashion. They think like filing cabinets. this is not their fault. If they don't think that way, their drawers will all get mixed up and they won't be able to provide the service their government, company or organization required. The most important impact of script on human history is precisely this. It has gradually changed the way humans think and view the world. Free association and holistic through have given away compartmentalization and bureaucracy. Next topic, the language of numbers. As the centuries passed, bureaucratic method of data processing grew even more different from the way humans naturally think. And ever more important, a critical step was made sometime before the 9th century AD when a new partial script was invented, one that could store and process mathematical data with unprecedented efficiency. This partial script was composed of 10 signs representing the numbers from 0 to 9. Confusingly, these signs are known as Arabic numerals, even though they were first invented by the Hindus. But the Arabs get the credit because when they invaded India, they encoded the system, understood its usefulness, refined it, and spread it through the Middle East and then to Europe. When several other signs were later added to the Arab numerals, the basis of modern mathematical notation came into being. Although this system of writing remains a partial script, it has become the world's dominant language. Almost all state companies, organizations, and institutions, whether they speak Arabic, Hindi, English, or Norwegian, use mathematical script to record and process data. Every piece of information that can be translated into mathematical script is stored, spread, and processed with mind-boggling speed and efficiency. A person who wishes to influence the decisions of governments, organizations, and companies must therefore learn to speak in numbers. Experts do their best to translate even ideas such as poverty, happiness, and honesty into numbers. Entire field of knowledge such as physics and engineering have already lost almost all touch with the spoken human languages and are maintained solely by mathematical script. Most recently, mathematical script has given rise to an even more revolutionary writing system, a computerized binary script consisting of only two signs, 0 and 1. The words I am now typing on my keyboard are written within my computer by different combination of 0 and 1. Writing was born as the maid servant of human consciousness but is increasingly becoming its master. Our computer have trouble understanding how Homo sapiens talks, feels, and dreams. So we are teaching Homo sapiens to talk, feel, and dream in the language of numbers, which can be understood by computers. And this is not the end of the story. The field of artificial intelligence is seeking to create a new kind of intelligence based solely on the binary script of computers. Science fiction movies such as The Matrix and The Terminator tell of a day when the binary script throws off the yoke of humanity. When humans try to regain control of the rebellious script, it responds by attempting to wipe out the human race.